Hi, my name is Bryce, and I'm a workaholic. Workaholism has been studied for over 45 years. But actually, in recent years, it has become a much greater issue because of technology. They call workaholism an addiction of the century. Because here's the thing, it's not recognized as an addiction in the same way as alcohol or drug or gambling. And really, the greatest way to deal with workaholism is self-awareness. I was reading an article in U.S. News and World Report a couple weeks ago, and it listed some things that would be indicators of whether or not you're a workaholic. You're first in, last to leave. Stressed when you're not at work. No satisfaction with accomplishments. Mind is at work when you're not. Report for duty even when you're sick. Don't feel well. Too accessible. You're hiding work from your loved ones. You think of how you can free up more time to work. You spend much more time working than initially intended. You work in order to reduce feelings of guilt, anxiety, helplessness, and/or depression. You have been told by others to cut down on work without listening to them. You become stressed if you are prohibited from working. You deprioritize hobbies, leisure activities, and/or exercise because of your work. I said to you at the beginning of this series now, almost 3 months ago, that one of the confessions that I needed to begin with, and so we'll end where we began, that we are talking about things, and I am sharing truth with you that I have not yet fully realized in my life. And I was thinking there's maybe no greater example than today. I mean, maybe this is the height of hypocrisy for me. But maybe it's not, because I was equally inconsistent on all the other topics. But I just, today, as I think about how I'm not feeling well, and, you got that little baby, you're sick, got a cold, blah, 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 But really, it was a good reminder to me that really we're sharing truth that we have not all realized. But it still is the truth. It still is God's word. It's still what God desires for us to have realized in our life. And so just kind of reviewing for the last time this whole life wheel that we've been looking at in your notes, and it'll be on the screen, that we look at this idea that there are 9 parts of all of us, right? In really 3 main sections: our soul, our spirit, our soul, and our body. And so we are now at the final piece, the R, the rest. And I feel in some ways that the R, the rest, actually pulls everything else together. We've been, recent weeks, been getting some requests for this series, and we're actually going to make this series available, the total series available to you. If you would like a copy of it, or you know someone that you might like to give a copy of this series to, we're going to just ask you to write that on the back of the connection card, and we'll make sure we get in contact with you to get this series. We've gotten a bunch of requests for it, and so we definitely want to be aware if you need, if you would like a copy of this series. Obviously, you can go back on the internet and look at it anytime you want, but if you want the whole series put together, we're making plans to make that happen. But really, the series was based around one verse. We spent really 3 months talking about one verse, and it's found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23, and it says this: "May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ." And we talked about this idea that to truly be whole is to be balanced in all of our interconnected parts. We realize that we are a spiritual being. We are someone who has a soul. We are a person, we are people that have bodies. And so how do we balance all of those and be whole and healthy? And we said that they're interconnected, and to really just concentrate on one to the neglect of the other two is not going to make you as whole or maybe as spiritual as you might think. And so as we've come to this last week and this idea of rest, my hope is that you'll see how important rest truly is in the grand scheme of being whole. Because let's be honest, we serve a God who created us to be people of systems. I mean, I don't know much about the body systems, but there's a lot of systems. And I know that God has created a lot of things, and he's created us in systems. And so there are systems that he has put in place in order for us to be whole. And one of those systems is a 1+6 system, right? There's 1 day a week, which we call the Sabbath, and then there's 6 days a week that we work. And that is God's system. And I wonder if all of the discussion about the Sabbath and all the discussion about working 6 days and taking 1 day off, maybe if you boil it all down, it's really just an issue of obedience. That when we don't rest, we're really just being disobedient. And we're going to explore that much more deeply. But I want us to understand that God is the great systematist. I mean, he set it up. He's created systems. And here's what I want you to not miss today. That God has designed us in a way in order to sustain us and allow us to have all the energy we need to go, do everything he desires. God has given you everything that you need to go, to be, and to do exactly the way he designed you. But the way he designed it is for your go, do to be done in 6 days. Whatever he designed you to do, whatever he wired you to do, his system of doing it, his systems of going, being, and doing is a 6+1 system. If we quickly look back to Psalm 23:2, we know that there is something very interesting that we oftentimes just look past. Look with me in Psalm 23:2. It says this: he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. Now here's the thing. We've read that passage and nothing really even jumps out at you except that second word, makes. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? He makes. That doesn't necessarily look very voluntary. Because he knows that sheep, like toddlers, don't like to lie down, right? Sometimes he has to make us lie down. I mean, I'm sure you have probably better stories than I do about the nap time wars, when a little kid doesn't want to nap, right? And so these nap time battles, sheep like toddlers don't like to lie down. Workaholics don't like to stop or quit or relent. I mean, have you ever been to a hospital, or maybe you were in the hospital or you went to the hospital and there was a person in the hospital bed and the conversation went something like this. Well, it's probably a good thing because he needed to force you to slow down. You know, we had to be forced to slow down. That's why you're in the hospital bed, because you had to be forced to slow down. You know, it's interesting that we understand that sometimes we need to be made to lie down. And here's the hardest part about being a workaholic. Sometimes it's celebrated. Sometimes workaholics have a lot of cheerleaders. And here's the thing, when you're a workaholic, you feed off of the cheers. It makes you want to do it more. But that's not God's system. That's not how God set it up. Psalm 127 verse 2 in the New Living Translation says it this. I mean, it's like, wow, this is like in the Bible. It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning to late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones. Church, why do we work so hard from early morning to late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, when God is the one who desires to give us rest? And so much of when we talk about the idea of rest, we immediately have this image of lying down on a couch, right? And then probably some of you are already thinking about that. It's like, man, when I get out of here, I'm going to have a little bit of lunch, and then I'm going to lie down. But I wonder if that's simply just a physical manifestation of a much greater theme going on when we talk about rest. And so in your notes, we have this idea of whole life rest. And I want us to take a good, honest look at the reasons why we are called to rest. And Dr. David Stein, whose series this is, and we've said that from the beginning, DC Metro, and we were exposed to this series back in November of 2014, and we were so moved by it, we wanted to bring it back here. And so one of the things that he shares in this whole life rest is he gives these, first thing he says is, realize my value. If we're going to have whole life rest, the first thing we need to do is realize my worth. Do you know that you're more valuable to God than your friend thinks you are? You're more valuable than you think you are. Now, that'd be hard-pressed. Like, I think I'm pretty valuable. But God thinks more of me. I need to realize my worth. James 1:18 says this, God decided to give us life through the word of truth so that we might be the most important of all the things that he made. You're the most important thing that God, the creator of the universe, made. That's a pretty high praise. That you're the most valuable thing. And so when we talk about workaholism, we're basically talking about our identity. And now listen, we always say this, right? But we never live it out normally. That it's not about what you do, it's whose you are, right? That's a Sunday. Listen, Mrs. McNutt, my Sunday school teacher in like the 3rd grade, like 30-some years ago, told me that, right? She's told me that, listen, I'm valuable because God loves me. I'm not valuable because of the letters in front of my name or the name over my office door or where I live. So, I know this truth, but do we live it? It's not about, your worth is not based on what you do. It's based on whose you are. And listen, we can still nod and yeah, all right, that makes sense. But here's the thing. When you come up to someone and you say hi, one of the next questions is what? How you doing, right? What's up? How you doing? Those are not whose you are questions. Those are how are you doing? Those are what are you doing questions. Here's the reason. The reason why we ask that question is the exact reason why we shouldn't ask the question. The reason why we ask people, how are you doing, is the exact reason why we shouldn't ask them. And here it is, ready? Because it fluctuates. Because there's good days and there's bad days. There's medium days, there's great days. There's terrible days. And so here's the thing, it's a roller coaster. The way you feel, what you're doing is going to fluctuate. But whose you are never fluctuates. And so when someone says, how you doing? Say, forgiven. That never changes. What's going on? Blessed. Because it never changes. Because it's talking about whose you are, not what are you doing. And so, church, the first thing when we talk about resting, it's about understanding your worth. Understanding the value in your worth. It needs to be answered the same way every single time because it's based off of whose you are. That you're a son and a daughter of the Most High God. That's whose you are. Not on what you're doing or what you did or what you anticipate doing. It was a week ago or 2 weeks ago we talked about 1 Corinthians 6:20. This idea that you were bought with a price. You were bought at a price, that you have a value to God. God has designed you a certain way, and he desires that you live whole and healthy. And one of those ways is resting in the knowledge that you are not what you do. You are who you belong to. That's who you are. Your true identity is whose you are, not what you do. That's the R. Let's move on to the E. Enjoy what I already have. If we're truly going to rest, again, now you can obviously see now we're already moving away from the couch, right? We're not sitting on the couch anymore. Now we've got our mind thinking about our worth. And now, number 2, enjoy what we already have. Ecclesiastes 4:4 in the Good News translation says this: I have also learned why people work so hard to succeed. It is because they envy the things their neighbors have, but it is useless. It is like chasing the wind. Man, talk about a kung fu kick in the gut, right? Man. We're working hard so we can buy things that we do not need with money we do not have to impress people we don't even like. Right? Come on, church. We're working hard to buy things that we do not need with money we do not have to impress people we don't even like. We need to enjoy what we already have. Ecclesiastes 3:13 says this: all of us should enjoy what we have worked for. It is God's gift. God gave it to you. You need to enjoy what you already have. And I love this in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. I love this. And again, we've read this passage a bazillion times, but I love how Dr. Stein pulls it out here. In Genesis 1:31, look at this. It says, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the 6th day. Here's the thing, church. God had the ability to see it all. Can you imagine God walking through the 6 days, and then he gets to the end of the 6th day, and he looks back. He looks back on all that he's done. He's kind of impressed by himself. He's so impressed by himself after looking at all he had done in those 6 days. What's he do on the 7th day? He rests because he says, I want to enjoy that which I have created. I want to enjoy that which I have worked for. I have put in the 6 days. I have seen the beauty of my handiwork. And now I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy what I already have. 6 days of working. He looks back and reflects and says that it is very good. Isn't this a clue to us? Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. This is a clue to us, church. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. But the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. How often on Sundays do you look back? And how often do you enjoy the previous 6 days? Now, if you're honest, how many of us probably... maybe after lunch, but definitely by the time the clock starts 4 or 5. What do we start doing? We're thinking about Monday. That is not God's design. There's a passage about worry. We can go to that, right? Don't worry about tomorrow. Why? Because tomorrow's got enough worries of itself. Don't worry about Monday on Sunday. Think about Monday through Saturday on Sunday. Think about what God has done for you. Think about what you have done. Think about what you have accomplished by the hands and the feet and the gifts that God has given you. That's the model. That's the design. On Sunday, the day of rest, it's a day of reflection. It's a day of celebration. It's a day of acknowledging that God has been good. But if we're honest, I just wish I was. See, here's the thing. The only way I'm a decent preacher around here is because I just preach my life. And so when I say things, they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds right. Just because I know it, because I'm living it. The reason, church, man, I wish I could talk louder because I'm really excited. My voice isn't letting me doing it. The reason, you're like, I'm so thankful he can't talk very loud. Now, don't get me distracted. Then we'll be here longer. Oh, yeah. The reason, you want to know the main, number one reason why we don't on Sunday think about Monday through Saturday and we try to move to Monday is because in our heart of hearts, we're not that happy with Monday through Saturday. We're actually not really excited about what happened, right? We want to get on to Monday. I mean, listen, phew, I'll save you that portion. But the reason why I want to go to Monday is because I want to do better on Monday than I did on Monday through Saturday. I want another chance at it because I screwed up last week, so I need another shot. But here's the thing, that's not God's design. God's design is saying, listen, I have made you and I have gifted you. Celebrate what you have done. In church, the reason why we don't like to do that is because we struggle with stopping and looking back because we frankly are not happy with what we've seen. And we'd rather not have introspection and evaluation. We just want another chance at the game. But see, that's not God's design. God's design is saying, listen, celebrate what I've done in your life over the last 6 days. Stop striving and start trusting. I don't know if it's an American thing, but we have built into our DNA to be strivers. We strive. If it's going to be, it's up to me, right? That's so anti-Jesus. That is so anti-biblical. Where do you see if it's going to be, it's up to me in here? That's so contrary to the message of God and the gift of Jesus Christ. If your salvation was up to you, you're in trouble. That is not the message of the Bible. The Bible is not about a message of striving that if it's up to you, if it's going to be, it's up to you. It's a message of placing our emphasis and our dependence upon God. How about Hebrews? You can turn with me in Hebrews. Okay, we'll go over here. Hebrews chapter 4. I always get, see, that's my competitive side. If the screen gets there faster than I do, I just desert the Bible. That's a bad example of your pastor. I'm like, okay, we'll just do this. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 8 through 11. For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken later about another day. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter the rest so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Now, I don't have a whole lot of time to dig into that, but here's the things that I want to pull out very quickly. That Sabbath rest is for the people of God. Sabbath. A Sabbath is for the people of God. And that he encourages us, the writer of Hebrews encourages us that everyone should make an effort to enter into that rest. So that no one would fall and be disobedient. Here is the biggest lie of the enemy when it comes to workaholism. You actually think that you're going to do more and be better by giving more. And here is the thing, under further review, it actually is not true. Isn't that what we already know that about tithing, right? We already understand that God, you've heard me say this, right? God can do more with 90% of your income than you can do with 100%. We believe that, right? I would say the majority of us in this room believe that. But when it comes to our time, somehow we forget that. That to not rest is actually to cause us to fall. And he further emphasizes that in Hebrews chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. Look at these. Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we also have had the good news proclaimed to us just as they did. But the message they heard was of no value to them because they did not share the faith of those who obeyed. Now stay right, okay, keep going. Okay, we'll go. Okay, that's fine. Sorry. So now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said. So I declared on oath in my anger that shall never enter my rest. And yet his works have been finished since the creation of the world. Okay, that's all she has. That's good, because I didn't want to talk about that one anyways. So I want to go back to verse 2. Here's the thing, and this is the thing that I pulled out of this. It's very interesting in this verse. They're talking about Sabbath rest, but the interesting thing they say here is, but the message they heard was of no value to them because they did not share the faith of those who obeyed. So here's the thing. I believe that Sabbath rest is an issue of faith. And I didn't realize that till this week. Because here's the thing. If we feel like we have to keep working, and we feel like we can't stop, and we cannot relent, we're basically saying that God can't do it without us. If I feel like I have to give 80 hours a week because if I rest any bit, it's all going to fall apart. How whacked is that? How messed up of thinking is that? That if I give up anything, it's all going to crumble. Where is faith into that? And I feel like that's where, when we take a Sabbath, when we rest, when we don't take ourselves so seriously, we're actually demonstrating faith. I mean, it's the height of arrogance to think that you can't rest because God doesn't have it under control. Man, how dare we say that? Wow, okay. So let me go quickly through the rest of this. The whole life Sabbath benefits. And you know these, we've been talking about them the whole series. Number one, rest your body. When we Sabbath, when we rest, we actually are renewing and refreshing our physical body. Secondly, we recharge our souls. When you're resting, you give your soul the chance to recharge. We talked about this in recent weeks. We know in Mark 8:36, it says, what profit a man to gain the whole world? Does that sound like a workaholic? But what? Forfeit what? He forfeits his soul. You can gain the whole world, but you forfeit your soul. So that when we rest, we not only rest our body, but we recharge our soul. And then certainly when we rest on Sabbath, we refocus our spirit. Through Bible reading and prayer and faithfulness to Jesus, journaling and devotions, committing to making 6-day changes. Did you ever think about that? Today, if there's something in your life that you want to adjust, make a 6-day change. Make a 6-day change. Say, listen, Lord, I'm committing today to make a 6-day change. On this day, I'm refocusing my spirit in this area, and I want to make a 6-day change. And see where you're at next Sunday. And then finally, the T. Transfer my pressure for God's abilities. You know, recently, people have told me that I might be an anxious person. Does that shock her, right, Josh? But I read Matthew 11:28 and 29, and it tells me this. Come to me, all you who are tired and have heavy loads, and I will give you rest. The load I give you to carry is light. It's light. The load I give you to carry is light. God is saying, whatever the heavies are in your life, whatever those heavies are, give them to Him. And the load He wants you to carry is light. You know, for a long time, I looked at the Sabbath almost as a punishment. It's like, man, I got to stop. But here's the truth, and this is your last fill-in. The Sabbath is the system for you and I to go be do. That is how God has set it up. Wherever God has called you to go, you will not be able to go. Wherever God and whatever God has called you to be, you will not be able to be. Whatever God has called you to do, you will not be able to do without rest. That hits me deep because I have big dreams. I desire to see God do amazing things in my life, in my family, in my church. But more than maybe I've realized in my whole life, this truth has come and smacked me right in the face. You will not be able to go be do without rest. That's just not the way I set it up. In closing, you remember when as an elementary school student, you would play that game, Mercy? You know that game? Josh, you know how to play that game? So you lock fingers, right? And you try to squeeze, right? And you lose when you say what? Mercy. Nobody ever wanted to say mercy. Guess what happens to kids that don't ever want to say mercy when they're playing that game as elementary school students? They grow up. And they become big boys and big girls. And guess what they still don't do? They don't say mercy. They're relentless. They'll do anything at all cost to not quit, to not fail, to not stop. And guess what? We're less effective. We're less effective. It is God's system. God's system is a 1+6 system. It's a 1+6 system. That's the way he set it up. That's the way he designed it. And so if we want to be whole, if we want to live the whole life, we need to get this piece right because we will be out of balance. We will not be connected and interconnected in all of our related parts if we don't have rest. In your notes, you have a connection card, and also in your notes, there's next steps. And I'm going to invite the worship team to come back, and I just want to review these next steps with us. If you have them, pull it out, or you have your notes there. I commit to reread and meditate on this week's highlighted scriptures. So look at those scriptures that we talked about and just begin to read them and see how they apply to your life. That's not difficult to do. What is God saying to you through these scriptures? Number 2, I commit to better realize my true worth is in whose I am and not what I do. Think about that. That's a hard one for me. Number 3, I commit to making at least one Sabbath adjustment, believing that my go-be-do will benefit after taking the time to whole life rest. Number 4, I commit to download the Whole Life app. If you have a smartphone, you want to go to your app store and you want to type in the Whole Life. And when you get there, there's an app. And it basically is the Whole Life wheel. And every day, in all 9 categories, you can chart your progress. It's a really cool feature, and I would encourage you to do that. If you want to really try to intentionally grow in a certain area, if you intentionally want to round out your whole life wheel, go there and check that out. And then finally, I commit to invite a friend, relative, coworker, or neighbor to celebrate Easter at BHMC next Sunday at 10:30.